Okay, you've got all those degrees. I was watching it in reverse, upside down on my iPad. I think I deserve a medal for that. I don't know that I fully understand blockchain, but you gave me a pretty good insight. And maybe with blockchain first, how does it improve our risk analysis?
Sorry, am I on?
So a lot of biosecurity is based on risk analysis, isn't it? So we check that ship because it's come from that country with brown marmorated, what is it called? Stink bugs. So does the blockchain help improve our risk analysis?
It certainly does. So I was just considering various ways it could do that. So one of the issues in risk analysis is making sure that you have the appropriate information to make that judgment. And for my sins, I'm a member of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and I have previously been an assistant director in fraud control. And the number one fraud scheme is around document manipulation. So when you're trying to make decisions about what's going on, and we were talking about traceability before, and infected cattle and those sorts of things, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate data in front of us to make the appropriate judgment. And so it can increase our decision-making capability by ensuring that there's integrity within that information.
I think that's a yes. I'd like to ask some of these questions. Keep voting for the question that you want asked most, and I'll just ask Gavin first. How was your approach to biosecurity to control the spread of Panama TR4 different to elsewhere in the world where it's found?
Yeah, I probably think for us, early detection was the key, and like I didn't explain in my presentation, but everywhere else in the world, Panama multiplies exponentially. So you find one plant this month, 10 in 2 months' time, 1,000 in 6 months' time, and it's just rampant. So I think, yeah, hopefully it was from good management, not just luck, but really taking out that big area initially when we found it was a very good move. It seems to play it out like that. We've only found 2 other plants, so yeah, it's basically had minimal impact on our production.
The ABC went a bit crazy on just how far this could spread and how we could all be not eating Cavendish bananas, that it could be wiped out. It's a $300 million, am I right?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the figure.
Somewhere in that order.
Yeah.
And we were wrong,
No,
because
you're
you can't
right.
make those projections. It could still.
It still could wipe the whole industry out, but it's just a matter of how proactive growers are.
But if we followed your steps of protocol, then potentially it's not going to wipe it out.
A lot better chance.
And I think the relationship that you've built with the government and how that has worked, and you have regular biosecurity checks. Do you want to talk us through what the relationship is like and what you appreciate in that?
Yeah, I guess it was a very collaborative relationship. We obviously implemented a lot of biosecurity early, so had a pretty good idea of what we wanted to do. And then, yeah, I think that went a long way with working with biosecurity and the government. They saw how committed we were and to the cause, so they were really, really keen to work with us and make that as seamless as possible, that transition from being clean to being infected. And as far as even developing a protocol where for us to send bananas off the farm, we had to have an inspector there, and they'd inspect samples of the cartons going out. They had to be soil and plant material free. So they were there, the whole time we were working, which some people would say that'd be pretty hard, someone looking over your shoulder all the time. But, if you're trying to do the right thing, well, if they find something, it's only a mistake or whatever. It's not really anything you're doing wrong. So, and they gained enough confidence out of that where they developed a system where we could actually grow and assess our own fruit. So there was a protocol there, same as what the papaya fruit fly one was. for us, or the whole industry, to be able to send bananas off a Panama-infected farm. So.
One of the top questions voted for most favourably is, how do you provision financially or non-financially for an unforeseen biosecurity threat? You knew what you were up for. So Melanie Leather, there's a variety of things that threaten the beef industry and pastures. How do you provision for it financially or non-financially?
I think it's all about planning and management, and making sure that you've got good surveillance to try and get onto things early. And I think the Panama was a good example of that. Being able to handle something earlier rather than later. But we can't afford not to invest in good biosecurity measures. I think it's something that probably has to be front and centre in our business and risk analysis, is making sure that we can provide financially for any sort of biosecurity threat that might come our way. But certainly prevention is always going to be our best measure.
So you mentioned as well, Gavin, that farmers, like yourself, actively engage with the government. So Melanie, that relationship with government, do you share that, that relationship? Do you, what sort of importance do you place on levels of government working with you?
Look, I think, any sort of relationship that you can have with government departments is critical. We certainly work with Animal Health Australia, Department of Agriculture, Fishery and Forestry, so DAF in Queensland. That they're a absolute source of information for us, and they can give us the tools that we need to be able to implement biosecurity on our properties and be able to manage things if something goes wrong. And I think having that communication is just vital.
Rob, from the CSIRO, what do you see as the potential uses and limitations of blockchain in biosecurity?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We're going to stop talking about blockchain sometime soon, hopefully. It's going to become a back office thing. It's going to be that thing the IT guys do. It's not going to be at conferences and places like that. We're just going to be able to trust that when the computer says something, that it says something. And so what does that mean? That means that we need to start thinking about what do we trust. There's a lot of people out there at the moment with blockchain saying, hey, I've got a proof of concept, I've got something that you can put in and it's going to solve all of your trust problems. But that's not necessarily the case. And here's a slide I prepared earlier. One of the issues in the turn of the century, they started looking at the web and going, hey, we're starting to do commerce on the web. What does that mean? And people started trusting things a little bit too much. And so this is from a Stanford academic, BJ Fogg, and he did a lot of work around what does this trust stuff mean. And he really boiled it down to it's all about credibility. It's all about believability at the end of the day. And he found two major components. There was trustworthiness, which was, is this thing fair and equitable? Is it going to do the right thing by me? And then expertise. Now, this is the same for a person or a computer. And the problem is we trust computers to be right. It's sort of like the computer said no thing from Little Britain, right? So they're really fast, they add up numbers. Of course they're correct, right? And so we have a tendency to overtrust computers. And sometimes that falls through to, hey, here's a new solution, a new system, and people are like, oh, well, the computer said that's okay, so that's fine. So the challenge here with blockchain is it's salient, high profile, everyone's probably come off the boil a little bit now, but everyone's wanting to find out about this stuff. And the point is, it's about the computer's data not changing. It's not necessarily about how we get things on or off the chain. So one of the areas that we thought might be really useful in putting these types of systems in when we're talking about large complex supply chains was not a whole replace the supply chain, not, hey, we've got this end-to-end solution and it's going to cover everything. It was, where are the critical points? Where are the certificates that could be manipulated? Where are the high critical information assets that we need to rely upon for that decision making I was talking about before, where we can say, we need to make sure this doesn't change. If that doesn't change and we can trust that, that's going to elevate our level of trust. It's not going to be perfect. We're not going to solve everything, but we're going to solve a few small things. That's some of the areas which we think are probably the really important areas to look at. And so there's some of the areas that we're starting to do research in.
Did you want the next slide up?
You could do that too. Here's another slide that I prepared earlier. Trust is a complicated area, and I'm actually doing some research with the Governance Institute of Australia at the moment around digital trust and saying, what is this stuff? So we've spent a lot of time doing social license to operate in the mining space, and we came up with this model. So we've been working on that for a good 10 years or so. We're now starting to ask the question, what does that mean in the digital space? So when companies are dealing with consumer data, what does it mean? And governance capacity in terms of, are they able to do what they said they would do? And in this case, just distributional fairness is about, hey, you're going to dig something out of the ground. What is the community going to get out of that? But on the online world, it's, hey, you're taking my data, what do we get back for that? And then procedural fairness is, is the thing actually going to do what it said it was going to do in a way that won't harm me? All of these things together, we know work in the mining sector, in the extractive industry. We're starting to ask that question about, what does that mean online? Because we know there's an over-reliance by people on technology, and they go, yep, technology said that, so that must be right. We know that there's starting to be an organisational capacity issue in there. So the people that are operating the technology need to be trustworthy as well. So point of the story being, don't believe someone just because they say they've got a blockchain. You need to trust that organisation as well, that they're actually setting up something which is useful and in, I was going to say the public good, but it depends on the application, right? They've got to be someone, an organisation that's seen to be doing the right thing and seen to be capable in that space.
Can the panel then, leading on from that, we've still got to get people involved in biosecurity. So how do we get as many people as possible to put a biosecurity plan in place and implement it so that they can protect themselves and others? How do you get people involved?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Well, it's actually pretty easy in the beef industry at the moment because having a biosecurity plan is part of our livestock production assurance program. And if you want to sell cattle, it's a pretty good driver to make sure that you're LPA accredited. So, and part of that is having a biosecurity plan. The LPA program is an on-farm assurance program that underpins our market access for Australia. So, market access, we want it, we have to have a biosecurity plan.
And the NLIS is part of that?
Yep, so NLIS is part of our traceability system, and once again, that really underpins our market access as well. So Australia's recognised, I think, as probably a world leader in traceability with cattle, and certainly critical if we were to have an incursion, like an exotic disease incursion. Having that NLIS system that allows us to trace our animals will be the thing that allows us to return to trade quickly, so we can get on top of any outbreaks there might be there and get back trading as fast as possible. So, yeah, two pretty critical things for the beef industry, certainly.
And Gavin, the getting everybody on board, you showed lovely slides of everybody engaged in the conversation and wearing white or black gumboots. So how does that conversation go? They protect themselves, they take an investment in it.
Yeah, that's right. For our own people, that was quite easy because they could touch, feel and see it. So, but other people, I don't know, I guess some people don't believe that there are risks out there. They believe it's a concocted thing, it's a government thing. Try and get more jobs in the, what other exotic thing can we find so the government is jobs, like some people believe that, and they don't do anything about it. So you would think it's pretty easy to put a fence up and just, doesn't have to be pig proof or whatever and stop people coming into your property, just even fence the front or whatever, but some people don't do it. So I don't know, probably being able to trade would be a good way to do it. Add it into a food safety program or something, you know, it's not food safety, but something like that would be good. Yeah, and it's probably a matter of quantifying what you have to do and what disease you're trying to protect against, I guess. So, yeah.
Feel free to raise your hand and do follow-up questions to anything that may not have come up already on here. Yes?
Some of the systems that you would use to collate all this data, like plant beef and bananas, you've got to collect data. I'm in beef myself, so what are some of the recommended systems that you guys might use to simplify the farm management system?
So most, for us, our local ABGC, the Banana Growers Council, helped us with that, and also Biosecurity themselves had a plan that we could personalise, and then most of, like, it's probably pretty easy for what we've got because absolutely nothing can leave the property anyway, so there's no real paperwork involved there. There's only fruit that can leave the property, so it's quite restrictive, which in some ways makes it easy. Once something's on the property, it never leaves. So, yeah, and then most of the other plan and that was developed by, our head, ABGC.
There was a nice question to follow up from earlier, the trusting, and some people are mistrusting of government. But are you finding that neighbouring farmers are more interested in adopting biosecurity if, they've seen it work on your farms?
Yeah, I think they're definitely happy that we do good biosecurity because it's contained everything that on our property. There was another incursion a few weeks ago now. It was confirmed last week, and that property was only like 4 days back to trading again too. So obviously people have done enough biosecurity that maybe it hasn't protected them from catching the disease, but it's actually helped in being back to trading, so which is important for a business. The longer you're not trading, the worse it is for you, obviously. So I think there has been a certain level of adoption there. Yep.
Yeah. And Melanie?
Yeah, I would think, if you're doing a good job with anything on your farm, whether it's biosecurity or something else, the neighbours are always looking over the fence, and nobody wants to be the one that's the lagger. So, but I think particularly with biosecurity, to have regional plans where everyone within an area has got a good biosecurity plan, the region's got a plan, you work with local government and other local partners and have something that's really worthwhile that certainly gives you an edge if something goes wrong.
As an organic producer, do you come up against, bigger issues that perhaps more, conventional chemical farms can overcome?
I often think that sometimes being certified organic and EU and grasslands and all of our other certifications is often a help, because the more certifications you have, the more standards that you have to keep, the more records, and certainly biosecurity is important to every one of those markets. So we have to make sure that we've got our biosecurity right, or we're just not suitable for those markets. So I think, in some ways it makes it a bit easier for us.
Any final comment from the panel? Otherwise, I think at 5 o'clock we wrap it. Am I right? Yep. Thank you. Any final comment that has cropped up? Any final comment from the audience that you'd like answered? Well, remember to wash your hands before dinner and keep your own biosecurity in check. And thank you very much. Thanks to the panel. to Melanie Leather, Gavin and Rob.